Welcome to the Fitness Industry Council of Canada webinar, the pulse of Canadian fitness business. Brought to you by our sponsors including Matrix, ISOFIT, Stay Above Nutrition, and Zoom Media.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a few of our board members. I see Tanya as well, just kind of quickly scrolling through. And it's great to see so many folks joining us for this really important topic that, we've had quite a few conversations, not only here in Canada about this, but the Fitness Industry Council of Canada is highly engaged internationally with conversations on this topic. So, it is just a little bit after 1 o'clock Eastern time here in Ontario. So, really pleased to get things started. So, I will kick things off. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Zach Weston. I'm the Executive Director of the Fitness Industry Council of Canada. And welcome to our May 2026 webinar. Before we begin, I think it's important to recognize that, the fitness landscape is undergoing one of the most significant shifts in decades, with the meteoric rise of GLP-1 receptor agonists, medications with names that you're probably all familiar with, like Wegovy and Ozempic. This conversation around weight management, chronic disease, and lifestyle intervention is completely changing. As fitness and exercise professionals, we are no longer just asking clients about their diet and sleep. We are working alongside medical treatments. So, the Fitness Industry Council of Canada is working with the Health and Fitness Association in the United States, along with other international organizations, including Exercise New Zealand, UK Active, Oz Active, and others, on a comprehensive GLP-1 plus exercise project to quantify the additional value of fitness. We will have a white paper on this in the very near future to share with all of you that examines the 10-year horizon and projections on structured exercise augmentation to GLP-1 therapy. And while I can't share all of the details with you today, what I can share is that the return on investment of adding structured exercise on top of GLP-1 therapy exceeds 100% of a return, and over $3.5 billion conservatively in Canada alone. So, to help us navigate this new reality, we are absolutely thrilled to welcome a guest who uniquely bridges the gap between exercise science, clinical advocacy, and lived experience. But before I get to Dr. Patton, I do want to acknowledge and thank the generosity of our sponsors, in particular, our premier sponsor at the Fitness Industry Council, which is Matrix. And if you're unfamiliar with Matrix, they're one of the world leaders in the manufacturing of fitness equipment. We're tremendously grateful for their support. We're also very thankful to our sponsors from Stay Above Nutrition, an outstanding nutrition business founded in Hamilton at McMaster University. And all FIC members can get a discount on all of the products that they sell at Stay Above Nutrition. Discount code is FIC20. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ian Patton. He is the Director of Advocacy and Public Engagement for Obesity Canada. He holds a PhD in kinesiology from Western University in London, Ontario, and is a former registered kinesiologist and exercise physiologist. Ian combines his deep academic background with his personal journey living with obesity and navigating bariatric care. He's one of Canada's leading voices dedicated to redefining how we understand obesity as a complex chronic disease, eliminating weight bias, and ensuring evidence-based care is accessible to all. Dr. Patton, Ian, it's great to see you again today. Thank you so much for joining the FIC community. And perhaps before we dive into the questions and conversation, Ian, could you maybe take a few minutes to highlight your background for our attendees?
Yeah. Thanks for that intro, and thanks for having me. I think To start, I wanted to thank you for inviting me to this webinar. A lot of my work these days does feel a bit removed or maybe adjacent from my kinesiology roots. So a lot of the work I do now focuses on patient advocacy and policy and stigma and education around obesity. But I'm passionate about movement and how important it is for our health and well-being, and about making fitness and exercise safe and comfortable, accessible for all bodies. So I definitely appreciate this opportunity to be here and talk about this intersection of all my different worlds, how it kind of collides into this topic. So a bit about my background. I'm someone who's grown up with obesity pretty much my whole life. I was always that big kid in school. Um, Something that certainly has a degree of a genetic component to it, something that ran in the family. But I was always one that it impacted more than other people in my family. So at the same time, I also found sports and activity as a safe space for me. So I excelled in a number of different sports where size was an advantage. So things like hockey and baseball, rugby, football, and wrestling was my primary sport as I went through my university years. And I was good at those sports. So being active was always part of like the fabric of my life and something I was always really passionate about. And it led to me operating in two very different worlds. So in the sporting world where I was successful, my size was celebrated and my body was celebrated and revered. Then you have everywhere else in the world where it was made very, very clear that I was defective and I didn't fit in. So kind of, navigating the world and reflecting on it now is a bit of a challenge, kind of balancing those two worlds. But my love of activity and kind of my love of science led me to kinesiology in university. And I followed that up with doing my PhD and a postdoc, where my research focused on childhood physical activity and obesity. In my undergrad, I was captain of the wrestling team. So I was at that time a 300-pound plus high performance athlete who was training pretty extensively on a daily basis. Um, Injuries and the stress of life kind of took me off the mats during my graduate schooling years, and at that point in time my weight skyrocketed, my health deteriorated, and so after years and years, like all the way through my high school years and university years, and then when I hit that tipping point where I wasn't able to be active as I used to be, I realized I needed help because I couldn't manage this on my own. And I had lost weight repeatedly over and over and over again. But I needed help. So I ended up going and having bariatric surgery, which ended up saving my life. And in the years since then, I've kind of continued to manage obesity with the other evidence-based pillars of treatment. So that includes medication, which I use now. Um, I worked as an exercise physiologist, as you mentioned, for a few years while I was also teaching at York University in the School of Kinesiology. And then this opportunity to work full-time with Obesity Canada became a reality. And so now in this role with Obesity Canada, I'm involved in patient advocacy, the inclusion of lived experience in research and education activities, and I contribute to some medical education as well as I do a lot of policy work now. So it's kind of my quick synopsis of what I do.
Well, I appreciate the overview and the details there. It's really, I think, important and relevant for this conversation. And some of the terms that you used and were pretty strong language with regards to how you were viewed. Um, you've been quoted in the CBC stating that you had medical doctors telling you, "Why don't you eat more salad and go for more walks?" And as we know, you have a PhD in kinesiology, so you probably know more about diet and exercise than most. But that knowledge, wasn't able to be enough to help you, in that journey. And so, as we, shift and talk about Obesity Canada, Obesity Canada has been instrumental in shifting this definition of obesity from a simple lifestyle choice or a lack of willpower to a really and truly complex chronic biological disease, as you mentioned, the genetic component to this. And for fitness professionals who are joining us today, who have been conditioned to think strictly in terms of calories in versus calories out, How should we think about GLP-1 medications, and how does that change our fundamental approach to weight management with our clients?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, especially with all the attention that these medications are getting right now. So I think there's a few things here. It is human nature to want to simplify things down as much as possible. So when it comes to weight and obesity, particularly in the fitness industry, we've always kind of oversimplified it down to that basic equation of calories in versus calories out. And that this is something that we actually have absolute control over. That's kind of the prevailing narrative that's been out there for years. You can do it on your own, and I believed it myself. I lived that over and over again, and it's just not the case. We're ignoring the context of like if we're thinking about my experience here, we'd be ignoring the context of why my calories in versus calorie out equation might be off or different than someone else's. There's complex physiology at play. There's genetics, environment, social, psychological factors at play, and they all influence that equation. So to assume that someone would be able to treat and manage something like this simply with willpower is just not right. And it hasn't worked and it's not going to work. So the more complete and very complicated equation that can be very different from person to person. So like mine is going to be different than someone else's because the contributing factors to their obesity can be very different than mine. Food is very different for me than it is for many of my peers and anyone around me. Until recently, I really had a hard time trying to express what that was like. So from the moment I woke up in the morning to the moment I go to sleep at night, I had this very powerful, all-consuming food drive. It's distracting, it's all-consuming. All I thought about all day long was food, 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 food. What's in reach? What do I have in my house? What ingredients do I have, and what can I put together? If I am going somewhere, what's on the way that I can grab? And it was just always food, food, food. And willpower is a limited and depleting resource. It's not something that you have an unlimited amount of. So there's no amount of willpower that can overcome that biology that was overseeing my weight status and that, equation of what I was putting in versus what was going out. Our understanding of weight and weight regulation and obesity has evolved quite a bit, to the point right now where it's not really a debate anymore. We know that obesity is a chronic disease. We know that it's complex and it's about more than someone's size or weight. And one of the reasons why these medications are getting so much attention is because they're doing something for some people, not all people. We need to be clear that the medications aren't the right appropriate treatment for everyone. So, but one of those reasons that they are getting so much attention is because they're doing something that the diet industry has not been able to do, and that is address that biological underpinning of the disease. So for many of us living with obesity, they're popular because they're effective where nothing else has been. In our clinical practice guidelines, we reframe obesity management into three pillars of evidence-based treatment, including psychological intervention, bariatric surgery, and pharmacotherapy. And you'll notice that I didn't mention diet and exercise as treatments, and they're not included in those pillars of evidence-based treatment. Rather, they are the behavioral components of nutrition and physical activity are the roof that's supported by those pillars. So my treatment allows me to be much more successful in those behavioral components. So just like any other chronic disease, diet and exercise is not the treatment in and of itself, but it is a vital component of that chronic disease management.
GLP-1s have been seen to be competing with the fitness industry, that if the drug handles the weight loss, that we don't need exercise. So in reality, why do you think fitness professionals in our industry is actually more essential than ever before, especially for those who are on GLP-1s?
Yeah, this is another really good question. And I want to be a little bit provocative here, if you allow me to be.
Definitely.
So I would argue that the fitness industry never should have been in the weight loss game. Weight loss never should have been the reason why people engage in exercise, and weight loss never should have been a metric of success of my participation in exercise. So the fitness industry never really handled weight loss to begin with. And of course, I'm saying that as a kinesiologist, as an exercise, someone who like deeply, deeply believes that being active, physical activity, exercise is probably the most important thing you can do for your health and well-being. So take take that with a grain of salt. I'm of course speaking from like a population level, and I'm sure everyone has anecdotal stories of, success stories with clients and those sorts of things. So I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that the fitness industry is not critically important, but the framing of the reason why we would need a trainer was wrong all along. Physical activity and exercise is the single most important thing you can do for your health and well-being. It improves almost everything. We need trainers to help us live our healthiest lives, live longer with more quality of life, more function. We just need to take weight loss out of the equation. So when it comes to individuals undergoing obesity treatment, fitness professionals can be a critical resource to maximize and maintain health improvements. Many of us have been sedentary for a really long time. We may not know how to effectively and safely move our bodies in an exercise setting. Our bodies might be changing pretty rapidly. Our body composition might change, and fitness professionals can really help us navigate and help us achieve higher levels of fitness and vitality. So there is a critical role in there, but I think it's the framing of why we need those supports.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm sure that your comments did shock a few folks, but at the same time, I did see some applause from many who are really celebrating your approach to this. So thank you for that. And certainly, I instantly was thinking about some of the research I think that came out of Stephen Blair's lab in the United States and Texas that highlighted, fitness over. And sorry for using this term, but fitness versus BMI. And regardless of what BMI category, if you were fit, you had better morbidity and mortality outcomes. So, to your point, Ian, about, there's nothing better we can do for our health than to be physically fit and physically active. Love that. And, really trying to have an environment that is welcoming to everyone, I think is so important. And for those who haven't been active, such a critical role for trainers to help people learn what exercises to do, what sequence, what weight, what rest period between sets and so forth. There's a whole ton of work that personal trainers and fitness professionals and exercise physiologists add to that experience, well beyond just the accountability and showing up and being consistent. So if you're like me and you've been watching some of the news, maybe not so much all of the research, but we see, I think, a lot in social media and other platforms where we maybe, are subjected to misinformation. But whether it's misinformation or truth, there's a lot of information, a lot of major talking points in sports medicine right now with regards to the risk of lean muscle mass loss that is associated with the rapid weight loss that accompanies GLP-1 therapy. From your perspective, what specific modalities should fitness professionals prioritize to help their clients who are receiving GLP-1 therapy to try to, if possible, prioritize losing adipose tissue, but try to maintain that vital skeletal muscle that we all know is so important to maintaining and preserving metabolism.
Yeah, it's definitely a really hot topic right now, and there's lots of I know there's lots of ongoing research in this space right now, and there's even been some conflicting stuff that's been populated out there in the last little while. So, I think it's important to kind of take a breath with this, with any sort of, intentional weight loss. There is going to be a loss of lean tissue. And when you're talking about larger scales of weight loss, so like even with me and my bariatric surgery, when I was approaching 400 pounds when I was at my sickest prior to my bariatric surgery, I still had that 300-pound athlete in there. And in order to move that 400-pound frame around, I needed a pretty significant amount of lean tissue and muscle mass. But as I changed drastically and my body changed, it was natural and expected that there was going to be a degree of lean tissue loss along with the fat loss. So, it is a very, very important topic and something that we do absolutely need to pay attention to. And that's why when it comes to obesity treatment, particularly when we're talking about these GLP-1 therapies, we definitely do need to prioritize resistance training and trying to maintain some of that strength and lean tissue as we go through that change in our body composition. So, very similar recommendations. There's not specific recommendations for, GLP-1 therapy yet. But it would be very similar to what you'd see for anyone else. So, if we're talking adults, you've got the general 150 minutes of physical activity a week, 3 to 4 days of resistance training, kind of as part of that, those sorts of things. And in general terms, more is better and more intense is better, but there's not a linear return on investment with that. So, working people up to the point where they are doing more and more activity, and that resistance training is critical. I think if you think about, I'm involved in a bunch of different communities, whether that's the bariatric community or the people that are using GLP-1s. And a lot of us initially want to get into things like we want to become marathon runners and cardio and those sorts of things, and we prioritize that. And I think there is that need to redirect us to the resistance training, and that can be scary for some of us because it's not familiar, and it's a lot easier to throw on a pair of shoes and go outside and run or jump on a treadmill, which can have its benefits as well. But we do need to prioritize the resistance.
Let's actually continue this conversation because it's specific and talk a little bit about protein. Protein being the word of 2025, 2026. Fiber is now, coming up strong in 2026 as well. Are there considerations in terms of, muscle mass and those taking GLP-1s about macronutrient intakes to support the goals of weight loss, blood pressure, blood sugar management, while preserving lean muscle mass? What's coming out from your world that we should know about?
Yeah, I had to tap on I have a colleague of mine who's a dietitian who specializes in bariatric care and stuff like that. So big shout out to Jennifer Brown for helping me with this one a little bit. But when it comes to, dietary intake and especially protein, right now we don't have GLP-1 or like obesity management specific recommendations. The current evidence is indicating about 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram body weight per day is associated with preserving that muscle during weight loss. However, you have to keep in mind that actually achieving that amount of protein intake during GLP-1 therapy could be difficult for some people. So that's something to keep in mind. So the practical recommendations that she was telling me is to start by understanding how much protein someone is actually consuming and then gradually working to increase that over the course of time, while also making sure that they're consuming enough fiber-rich foods as well. And then she also mentioned the distribution of the protein and fiber throughout the meals. So you're not all getting it in one shot, at the beginning of the day.
And did she say anything about timing as well? Because we get hyper focused on that 30-minute window, all what have you.
Yeah, again, there hasn't been any clinical trials or anything specific to timing for obesity treatments or GLP-1s and those sorts of things. So it's going to be an individualized thing and dependent on, that individual's their routines, what works for them, those sorts of things. So there's not a specific timing for these things specific to GLP-1 therapy.
Building on that concept, with regards to the emerging information that we have, do you think there might be any information that would be helpful for fitness professionals to consider when they're thinking about adapting a client's training program or workout intensity and recovery protocols during these periods of titration and getting used to their GLP-1 therapy journey? And are there any clinical symptoms that perhaps they should be checking in with their clients on a daily basis before they start their exercise, just to make sure that, okay, we're ready to go today, we're ready to do the scheduled workout? Or is there maybe a signal that maybe we need to lower the intensity or duration on a given day?
Yeah, that's another really great question. I think how people interact with these GLP-1 medications or how they experience them can vary pretty dramatically. So some people are going to have, really, really suppressed appetite, or they could have a lot of nausea, especially early on when they first start the treatment. So as they titrate up to full dose or finding what dose works for them, there's people who could have some of those issues, which could obviously influence their energy levels and fatigue and their ability to participate in activity and those sorts of things, or even just the timing of like when, like there's some people that I know in the community where if they're taking their medication on the Monday, Tuesday's a bit of a write-off for them. But then they start feeling better as they get to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? So it's the timing of when they're taking the treatment. But it's important to know that it's not a one size fits all topic. It's going to vary pretty drastically. So for me, I'm actually someone who's really lucky. I didn't experience any of the side effects of the gastro stuff. That was not something I ever experienced with my medication. There's some foods that aren't appealing to me anymore, or I just don't have the drive for them. But I can eat in regular intervals. I eat smaller portions, obviously, and I feel like I have a lot more control, but I don't have any of those side effects. So for someone like me, it would be just like any other client. Take me through a training regime, focus on all the things you want to focus on. You know, be aware of all the same things you would be aware of for your other clients. But for others, when there is that nausea and fatigue, you obviously don't want to push them too hard when they're going through those challenging times, especially during the titration up. I would focus, especially during that titration process, less on the performance, but more on building the routine and just doing something, even a light activity for short periods of time while they feel, while they're going through that process of figuring out their medication routine. And getting into the routine of prioritizing movement and helping the client kind of celebrate and recognize the value in that, I think is really important as they get more comfortable with their medication. And then you can start ramping up the intensity as they're more established with the treatment.
Ian, just to follow up on that. So, for those who are joining and maybe not as familiar with GLP-1 therapy, can you maybe walk us through what does that look like, receiving GLP-1 therapy? I think there's probably some folks who don't realize that originally and still commonly it's an injection, but can you maybe share how frequently do people receive injections, and where are we in the pharmacological journey with regards to introducing oral versions of these treatments? And as you and I talked about before we started the webinar, just the notion that we have some generics now available in Canada, which have really brought the price down. and is going to make it much more accessible to Canadians, which is going to likely result in people on this call seeing more and more people on this treatment.
Yeah, there's a couple approved medications on the market in Canada right now. The first one that kind of came to market was a daily injectable. That was kind of like the first generation of these types of medications. Um, we now have two weekly injectables, so you take it once a week, which is a little bit easier to manage. So that's your Wegovy or Ozempic. They're the same molecule, just branded differently for different conditions. And then the other one would be the Zepbound or the trizepatide, which is the other weekly injectable. So those are the two that are on the market right now, available in Canada. Um, as far as the generics, that's for the semaglutide, which is the Ozempic Wegovy version. So that's the one that has generics that are coming into the market now. So those are the ones that you'll see people having probably some more access to as the price comes down. The oral medications that are coming out, they're currently under review with Health Canada. So I know one of them was just recently approved down in the US, and Health Canada is usually, 6 to 12 months behind the FDA. So I would expect you get one of those oral medications that is going to be available in Canada probably later this year or early next year is kind of the time frame I imagine you'd see those. So then you have all the different pipeline medications that are getting investigated now. So this is a space that is going to explode in the next, 5 to 10 years. You're going to have a whole lot of different treatment options available. There's going to be different mechanisms of treatments. So the molecules that they're developing have additional, layers to it. There's different pathways that they're targeting. There's combination therapies that are getting investigated. So it could look very, very different in the next, 5 to 10 years as more and more of these get kind of approved and available.
You've kind of touched upon this, but we'll dive deeper into it about the effectiveness of GLP-1 treatments without ongoing support in terms of exercise, lifestyle changes. So the combination of supervised exercise and pharmacological treatment. So when a client is on the medication that effectively manages their appetite and their drives, their relationship with exercise could change and shift. So how can the trainers and the operators listening on this call help their clients pivot their goals away from that number on the scale towards, the thing that makes most of us so passionate about coming into this industry, right? Of truly helping people embrace and love the benefits of exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge opportunity because I can tell you a lot of us, as we start the process of going through obesity treatment, whatever it is, whether it's bariatric surgery or medications or whatever, there's always a lot of us that have a high level of motivation to get into being active and exercising and those sorts of things in combination. Like we all want to do that. We all know it's what we're supposed to be doing. And so there's a high level of motivation there. So it's an opportunity to capitalize on that if we're doing it properly. I think trainers and fitness facilities have a huge influence on how we understand and frame physical activity and exercise. And if we want people to be committed to lifelong activity and those sorts of things, we have the responsibility to help them understand why it's important and why it matters. And that starts with honing in on all those positive outcomes that are way more important than the aesthetics or a number on a scale. If you think about it, many of your clients will probably come to you with a very basic weight goal as their kind of initial thing. Say they want to lose 50 pounds. Your job would be to help them understand and focus in on what losing 50 pounds would actually mean for them. Does it mean that they're going to be able to move more, be more productive, have an active lifestyle, be active with their kids? For me, when I was going through my bariatric surgery, one of my driving things that was critical to me was like, I wasn't able to be the father that I wanted to be. And coming from a guy who grew up being super active, I was struggling to do the things that I used to be able to do. I was struggling to be able to play with my kids the way that I wanted to play with them. And then post-treatment, as I, got healthier and I was able to do things more and more, I all of a sudden was coaching my kids in their hockey and baseball. And instead of being on the sidelines or even having the energy and motivation to go to these things that they were participating in, I was on the ice with them and I was making those memories. And so, like, just reframing what that change is going to mean to me practically is a real skill, but something that is like really, really important, shifting it away from the weight. So I would be very deliberate in acknowledging what that weight loss goal is, or that they have those goals initially, but I would never celebrate or reinforce those weight loss goals. I'd rather celebrate and reinforce all the other much more important things that comes along with it. So when your client comes in and goes, man, I stepped on the scale and I lost 20 pounds. This is awesome. You can be happy for them, but I would really hone in on what that 20 pounds meant to them and what it's meaning, like the actual practical application in their life is.
It's
Amazing.
beautiful.
It's such an important message, a hard one, not an easy one for a trainer, to have that. But I think with practice and time and skill, to recognize the value and the importance of what you've just said is so worthwhile. You've spoken extensively, Ian, about the deep-seated weight bias that exists in healthcare and society, and the fitness industry is certainly not immune. I'm wondering if you could share some subtle ways that weight bias currently and often does show up in gyms. And from your advice, how can fitness facility owner operators and trainers create a genuinely safe, weight inclusive environment?
Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely an area of passion for me, because I saw it on both sides, right? Like I was that fitness professional who was in the fitness facility doing my thing, and I saw how people were coming in. So this was post-bariatric surgery, and so my body was very different, and seeing how people coming in were experiencing the space and experiencing, starting or trying to initiate getting into the fitness world. And it can be very intimidating for a lot of people, especially people that are in larger bodies. So this is definitely something I could talk about a lot. I think there's a lot of things in the fitness industry that intentionally or unintentionally make it not the safest or comfortable space for people in larger bodies. And I do want to preface this and say, like, I'm not blaming people on this call and health professionals. I know a lot of fitness professionals do genuinely get into this to help people, and there's good intentions there. And so some of this is subtle, some of it is a collection. It's not necessarily your fault, but it's a collection of the world we live in and how we've experienced it in our bodies. And so there's that little layer there that we have to be aware of. Top of the list, I would think, is just those poor interactions that you have with people in the gym, whether they're real or perceived. So being judged or mocked or treated differently. Sadly, this thing happens in fitness facilities, and there's stories out there, and the way that we communicate with each other now. If something happens on the other side of the world that is horrific and terrifying and not a great experience, I might hear about it here in Toronto. And so, like, I'm more aware of some of these experiences people have. So it's out there, people know, and they're going to come in with kind of their barriers up, with their guards up, because they're expecting to be treated differently than other people there. So those past experiences and their expectations are going to kind of set the stage. So I think we simply have to start with kindness, and we have to demand kindness of our members, other members in the space as well, to make it an accessible space to begin with. I also need to think about the actual environment. Is this space accessible for a larger body? Can a larger body navigate and move around between the equipment in a way that doesn't make it feel like they're in the way and that they're infringing on someone else's space or impeding their workout? That's when I was in my largest body, that was probably my biggest concern. Am I messing up someone else's day by being in the way of them? So is the space accessible? Another thing to consider is the imagery. I think this one is one of the ones that is pretty big. Oftentimes, fitness spaces portray really unrealistic bodies, and it reinforces that I will never fit in or belong because I am never going to look like that. And if I walk into a space and I see the people that are there, the people that are working there, everything that's on the walls, all the imagery that's there. And if I don't think or I don't see myself or people like me there, I'm not going to feel super comfortable there. So the imagery is a big one as well. What else was there was a couple other things I had thought about. I think I touched on it a little bit, but we also have to recognize that there's a high level of internalized weight bias that we hold ourselves for many of us. So when we initially walk into that fitness space, we're going to have our guards up. We expect to be sneered at. We expect to be preyed on or judged or treated differently. The baseline needs to be the communication and how we talk to people and making it clear that you belong and that it's safe. And I think that's kind of like a really simple baseline. I guess the only other thing I could think of would be physical spaces. So like the change rooms and stuff like that. Again, getting to accessibility, something that people don't often think about is, like bathrooms. When I'm close to 400 pounds, am I worried about whether I fit on the toilet or, like where the toilet is located and is it stuck right up close to the wall in a way that I don't have the ability to sit on that? The chairs that are in the lobby or in the offices. So when I come to sign up and I'm going to sit down and have a chat with you, am I going to fit in the chair? Those little things can make a difference. And then, when it comes to being active and exercising, especially early on with a lot of people, having the ability to have some degree of privacy. So like if I can go and if there's a space where I can do my activity and exercise and not feel like every eyeball in the room is on me, is also something to consider. I know it's not always possible, but that would be fantastic to be able to have a little bit of privacy there.
That's fantastic. We've been writing about the marketing messages for quite some time, actually, about how our industry has needed to shift and continues to need to shift. It's not a one and done thing.
Yeah.
Really. Let's talk about the interdisciplinary approach. So, and this might be like fitness professionals don't have a role, but we see more and more doctors prescribing exercise, actually. So how can fitness professionals communicate and collaborate with a client's medical team without overstepping their scope of practice? What kind of conversations can they have with their doctor or dietitian? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, everyone works really well together and they can communicate together effectively and efficiently across those different health professionals. I would say there absolutely is a role for the fitness professionals in this grand scheme of health and wellness and chronic disease management. But we also have to realize that our system isn't always set up in a way that allows for effective communication between those different team members, and they often operate in silos. So as fitness professionals, your communication with the rest of that healthcare team is often going to be through the client themselves. So it's important that you're helping them understand and be able to communicate what it is that you're doing with them, the progress you're making, the important things that they need to relay on to their healthcare team. is going to be important. You're probably going to be taking certain measurements or collecting data that could be helpful to the rest of that team that they might not otherwise get. And that could help kind of shape things. So making sure that that's presented in a way or that the client has the ability to share that information with the rest of their team. You're also going to be seeing the client a lot more regularly than, say, a doctor or another healthcare team member. So highlighting things that you're seeing, you're observing, that they might want to discuss with or bring up with the rest of their team is going to be important. So there's a role there that's really, really important. I think when it comes to obesity treatment and the comment there about overstepping the scope of practice, I think when it comes to obesity treatment, I don't have any delusions. I know that some people on this call or some people who are in the fitness industry are still going to be skeptical or adverse to obesity treatments, and that's, fine. That's your opinion, and you can have that. And I think the critically important piece is that your client doesn't know that, if that's your take on it. You're fully able to have whatever opinion you want about obesity medications or obesity treatment. But that opinion is way outside of your scope of practice if you're communicating that opinion to your clients. All they need to know is that you're going to be there to support them in their health journey and you're going to do your best to help them. You shouldn't be influencing the client on if they're going to be using a medication. They just need to know that whatever they decide to do with their healthcare team, that you're going to be there to support them in achieving their fitness goals. So I think that's the one thing I worry about in that, is that people are kind of pushing their opinions or beliefs or thoughts into a space that might not be appropriate.
Appreciate that. Ian, we live in a world where there's so much misinformation. So I think your comments with regards to being informed, and this is why we wanted to bring you, the expert, from Obesity Canada, to talk about this today. From your interactions with the medical community, again, just kind of touching on data that we can support in these, interdisciplinary teams that Aaron was talking about. Have you been informed of any particular metrics that the medical community has found is really helpful for them that we as a fitness community could share through our patients to report back to augment and enhance their treatment and their care? What are some of the things that we should be trying to record and report?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we talk about outcomes for obesity treatment, I'm always pushing for, we need to go beyond weight, and simple BMI metrics is kind of the success metric. And so I'd done some work with an international group where we were looking at like patient reported outcomes that go beyond that and kind of encapsulate I guess, a more holistic view of this and what we should be reporting on. And so that includes things like, like quality of life and stuff like that. And that's not necessarily inside the scope of the fitness professional, but what would be measures and metrics of physical function and those sorts of things. So in that particular work, one of the things that came up in the research was that there's a correlation between, like if we're thinking about looking for quick and easy measurements that we can do that indicate progress or that we can use as tracking progress. One of the things was hand grip strength as a measure that can correlate to physical function. So like something simple like that, or like there's still a role for some of those anthropometric measurements, the hip to waist ratio and those sorts of things could be helpful and useful. Body composition measurements, which, maybe doctor's office might not necessarily have access to, but if you have the ability to measure and track changes in body composition, those things could be helpful and useful. So there's nothing like specific that is, recommended now, but in a lot of ways having a little bit more data can be helpful. So whatever you do have that you can share would be useful.
Awesome. Well, we are going to open up the floor to the audience to ask other questions for you. But before we do that, to wrap up this conversation, I'm going to hit you with a few quick rapid fire questions. So, Ian, whatever comes to mind first, love to hear what your initial reaction is. So, first question here is, what is the single biggest myth that fitness trainers still believe about GLP-1 medications?
I would say that obesity treatment is taking the easy way out. It's
Mm.
not. There's nothing easy about obesity management or chronic disease management. So I think that's the biggest one.
Excellent. If you could ban one piece of outdated weight loss advice from every gym floor in Canada, what would it be?
The phrase, all you need to do is eat less and move more. We need to decouple weight from fitness.
Beautiful. True or false? A client on GLP-1 should completely avoid high intensity interval training.
That's false, but with the caveat that they, like any other client, can safely and effectively perform that activity.
What is one non-scale victory a fitness professional should celebrate loudest with a client on this journey?
My favorite one is physical function. So being able to do something that I couldn't do before. That's the biggest thing. I went and I hiked up a mountain. Holy crap, I never could have done that before, right? Like that sort of thing has to be the biggest.
Beautiful. And last one, in one sentence, what is the ultimate future of the relationship between the fitness industry and medical obesity management?
Hmm. Uh, Reciprocal, collaborative, and mutually beneficial. We need to recognize that my obesity management allows me to be more successful in my fitness and vice versa.
Beautiful. Well, we are certainly engaged and interested partners to help in that journey, and happy to open up the conversation to the audience for any questions that folks may have.
And you can just unmute yourself and come on, or you can write it in the chat. Absolutely fine, either. I have
I'll
one.
make, oh, I was
Go,
going to speak
Sarah.
up.
You go first.
Okay. Okay. Thanks so much, Ian. I've heard you speak many times, but this was just, again, just a reiteration of all of the great stuff. You know, as someone who's been involved in the clinical side of exercise for over a decade and been very close to obesity medicine myself, I think that the message that you shared is absolutely on point, where you probably saw me clapping when you said the fitness industry has, you know, unfortunately done a disservice. And I mean, again, it's we did what we needed to with the information we had at that time, and that's
100%.
totally okay. But the reality is that unfortunately we distorted the relationship or the purpose of exercise, and that exercise is medicine for our body and for our mental health. And as much as we can preach that, exercise is not a weight loss pill. And until we can really kind of grip that picture, but understand, like you said, that it is the roof on it. All of the research shows that we do need exercise and nutrition in order to have long-term success, overall health. Again, I go back to that 2017 American College of Sports Medicine position statement that your physical activity is the number one, your dose of physical activity is the number one predictor of your overall health, not your weight. And so I've crossed the finish line of the Honolulu Marathon with people who would be classified as morbidly obese, but they walked 42 kilometers in 40-degree heat. And there was people that were 125 pounds who could have never done it at that time. And they were athletes and they were perseverant, and they're, you know, they were improving their overall health. They were improving their mental health. And so that weight bias, we do have to throw it out. And I think that everything that you said, again, is just, we really have to think about how are we creating the inclusive space, the non-biased space. And that starts with the way that we're thinking, because we still don't think about this the right way sometimes. And we may say oh, well, we are really inclusive in this and that, but still maybe deep in our minds, there's a thought there that maybe this person could have just done something differently and not found themselves in this certain position. And this truly, is a medical condition that, we are looking to treat. And I think that when we change the conversation and we can be part of a much healthier conversation, we can change how the fitness industry can truly have a significant impact on obesity and support everything that is going on. So thank you, Ian. I so appreciate it. I appreciate all of your message and look forward to connecting again.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think there's a correlation. I have very similar conversations when we talk about doctors, because when it comes to the bias and stigma piece, healthcare setting is not a safe space for us, and we've had some really negative experiences that leads to healthcare avoidance and stuff like that. So when we talked about this with doctors in the same sense, there's that acknowledgement that, we were doing the best with what we had at the time, but we understand things very differently now and we can do better. And it's just that recognition that the person that's sitting in front of you has probably got some experiences or some, thoughts that are going to influence how they interact with you to start. And there might need to be some repairing of that relationship before we get, I talk about the repairing the physician-patient relationship. There's also a relationship between fitness professionals and clients in at least that initial phase to make us feel like we're safe and we belong again.
Right now, 1 in 3 members cancels every year. Half of new joiners leave within 6 months, and acquiring a new one costs up to 25 times more than keeping them. The chains winning on retention are the ones investing in technology. Fitness KPI is your technology partner, built by fitness experts with 30 years of experience managing chains like yours. We centralize your data, apply AI, and turn it into automatic actions: retention, revenue, operations, growth. Over 1,500 clubs across 26 countries are already working this way. The technology is ready. Are you? Fitness KPI, from data to action.
I so wish I had heard you speak 30 years ago, Ian, but it's good that we're getting the message out now. I see Paul Kernahan from Ottawa has raised his hand.
Hey, yeah, Ian, thanks. That was awesome. Probably one of the most informed and passionate presentations I've seen on this. And it's interesting because right now I'm doing a lot of reading in these reference manuals about obesity. And it's so, to Sarah's point, yeah, the ACSM has a statement position on exercise with regards to obesity, but, in that, even in their own textbooks, they still define obesity by BMI, and most of them do, or by adiposity. Not only is it, I think, inaccurate, but it's not a useful definition, especially if, as an exercise physiologist and kinesiologist, I want to be part of a collaborative team and am part of a collaborative team with other healthcare professionals, and want to be part of that solution to, and I guess the question is, how do I demonstrate to other healthcare professionals, particularly family physicians who are pushing for lifestyle medicine, that I'm a practitioner that's going to be capable and knowledgeable in this space and have a better definition of it?
That's a good
Great
question. It's a great question. I think more and more of the, in the obesity specific space, like when I'm talking to these doctors and stuff like that, there is that acknowledgement that they need to do more when it comes to supporting people, in obesity management. But a lot of this falls outside of their scope, and they don't have the time and the ability to do the things that, need to be done with these people. So, I think the opportunity there is to present the fitness industry as, a supplemental or a resource that can help, that you guys have the ability to hone in on something very specific that the doctors aren't able to. When I go and see my obesity specialist, he can tell me in very general terms in the 5 minutes that I have with him about the importance of being active, but he can't show me how to set up a routine or, proper progression through that routine, can't show me the proper movements and how to adapt those movements to my body that's changing. So there's a critical role there. The definition part of obesity is a whole different can of worms, and something that is probably going to change a few times. So, like in the literature and research, we've kind of, like I said, we always like to oversimplify things. And so that's why we got the BMI classifications. As a researcher, there's value in that, in looking at those BMI classifications. But me sitting in front of a doctor or another health professional, my BMI doesn't really tell them anything either. So the utility of it is problematic. And so the definition has changed. We've all recognized that obesity is about more than weight and BMI itself. In our clinical practice guidelines, when we talk about the assessment of obesity, BMI is more of like a screener. It's part of it, but you have to go further and see what the impact of that individual's weight is on, and the adiposity is on their health. So there's the acknowledgement that there's people in larger bodies that are perfectly healthy and do not have obesity. If we're using the clinical definition that we are trying to move on now. And so there's, a Lancet commission last year or a little while ago that came out with their own definition of obesity and pre-obesity and talking about clinical obesity. Obesity Canada, we had our definition that came out in the clinical practice guidelines in 2020. So it's kind of evolved, and it's going to continue to evolve as things change. So I don't think we're going to have a solid definition for a little while, but just recognizing that BMI is not the end all be all. And if we are seeing BMI somewhere, it is just a screener at best.
We had a question from Rebecca, and I'm curious too. So if the GLP medication therapy stopped, what are the weight gain ramifications? Like, what are you hearing? Are we on these drugs for life? Is this what comes out from the Obesity Canada?
Yeah, this is an important point here. If we're viewing obesity as a chronic disease, and my GLP-1 treatment is a treatment for a chronic disease, the same way as me stopping my hypertension medication, my blood pressure would go up. So if you take away the treatment, the symptoms return. So I don't necessarily say I'm going to be on a medication for the rest of my life. I'm going to be treating my obesity for the rest of my life. One way or the other, I'm going to have to treat and manage obesity for the rest of my life. It is a lifelong chronic disease that I'm going to be managing. Right now, one of the tools I'm using is medication. It is going to be probably for the foreseeable future and for a very long time, one of those tools that I use. And I'm not necessarily concerned about that right now. It's the reality of it. It's a chronic disease. These are treatments for chronic disease. So it's going to be something that is long-term.
I'm curious. I'm going to follow up on that. You touched upon this very early on in the webinar about food noise, because it's something that we've heard a lot about, right? But I would like to hear from you that lived experience for us to really understand how the food noise perhaps has gone away.
Yeah, it's like I described how I had that uncontrollable food drive, and it's almost like I had a voice in my head that was just always or that little dude on your shoulder that's always like chirping at you for about food. It was all consuming. So I wouldn't even say it's like cravings or like that sort of thing. It was just this uncontrollable. It was always almost like just a little bit in the background, enough that it was distracting, enough that it would take up some of my brain space, some of my brain power, my ability to focus on everything. But this just voice driving me to eat and food. right from when I was a kid. Like I look back on it now, and like when I was a little kid, I had a high food drive. I got really good at cooking in a household of 6 people. So I would cook, and particularly baking. I would bake
Mhm.
cookies and all sorts of treats and all this stuff. And I got really good in the kitchen. But I did that because it also allowed me to like sneak a bunch of food. And when you're in a house of 6 people, it's really easy to sneak food because no, like you didn't eat all the cookies, but there's 5 other people in the house, right? So like I always had this drive, and I got really good at sneaking and eating food. And now that I have treatment on board, that voice in my head that's driving me for food is quiet. I feel like I have control. I describe it as I feel normal. Like when I was in
Mm.
university and I had all my roommates, and like seeing how they were around food and those sorts of things, I always felt I wasn't normal because I couldn't have the control that they had. If there was stuff in the house, I didn't have control. And now I have that control. And it's life altering for some of us.
Yes.
Ian, thank you. I've learned so much as always, and it's been great to have this relationship with you for several years now since we first connected, and you invited me to speak at the obesity and hypertension meeting a few years back. This is such important information. I believe currently there's over 10% of the Canadian population receiving some form of obesity medication treatment. uh, we need to do better. And I think your messages and insight have really helped those on the call today. And we'll be sharing this recording with our community because your messages are really, really important. So, from all of us at the Fitness Industry Council of Canada, thank you, and thank your team at Obesity Canada. We're here. We want to work with you and your team to help Canadians. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining today.